overcoming, outgrowing anxiety isn't as impossible or as hard as you may think. It is something that is absolutely worthwhile to put the energy and the time into it, because ultimately your life is waiting for you. Welcome to Get Real with me, Dr. Friedemann. If you want to live with greater purpose, authenticity, and empowerment, this is your time to upgrade your belief systems, unlock your true potential, and discover the endless possibilities of you becoming the creator of your life. Hey Jamil, it's so nice for you to take the time to talk with us about your journey with anxiety, and especially from a perspective as a man, how you experienced anxiety, how it was a struggle for you to even ask for help, and how you overcame it. So when you think about your anxiety, when did that start? When do you think was the first inkling that you were dealing with anxiety?
Honestly, I've dealt with anxiety my whole life. I would say from the time I was 11 or 12 years old, it's just constantly been a issue in the background of my life. But as you know, when I started working with you, I had a pretty severe breakup, and I think that's when I realized how the anxiety was really taking a toll on my life now, and how it was really, more of a problem than I really wanted to admit.
So before, how did you experience anxiety? Was it just sometimes a little uneasiness, or did you have night sweats, or what kind of symptoms did you deal with?
For me, I think it was primarily just like a constant um, undercurrent of uneasiness, and it would get, I think, it would intensify a lot in stressful situations or relationships, especially. I would feel especially anxious, almost to the point where I would. It was almost to the point where I was kind of in denial about how anxious it was. It was on the borderline of fear in terms of like relationships and certain things like that. So um, those are primarily the situations where I really felt it the most.
And how did you then deal with anxiety? Did you try to push it aside, ignore it? Did you self-medicate? What did you do? Did you talk with somebody about the anxiety?
My way of dealing with it primarily was denial. I think just not even letting myself admit how terrified I was, just kind of, and then maybe using some bravado or something like that to cover up the anxiety, as well as self-medicating. I've been probably using substances since I was 15. So and just maybe steadily increased over the years. But yeah, I started smoking weed when I was 15 years old, and then went to college and got introduced to alcohol. So, and on top of that, I think work as well was a big self-medicating thing for me. I always worked long hours, tough jobs, and that was kind of an escape for me as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And did you have at home, your family as a resource to talk about your feelings, or was that more a taboo?
No, I mean, we didn't talk about feelings in my house. It was very, it was like a vacuum, I would say, of emotion. It was very, any type of emotion on any end of the spectrum was kind of just cut off, and we stayed very, very surface, very in the middle, with the exception of maybe anger. There was some angry outbursts from people, but in terms of just talking about, I would say, like the soft emotions or complex feelings, there really wasn't any type of dialogue. So I didn't really learn those skills growing up.
So you were stuck with your anxiety on your own.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when you look around, you probably knew other friends or even family members that were also anxious. And did they do the same thing? Do you feel like they also just suppressed their emotions, didn't want to share them, felt like embarrassed about it? Or what did you see around you?
Well, I have a family history of alcoholism, so that's that's how a lot of my family dealt with it. And then on the on the flip side of that, I have a family history of very religious people, and so it was just kind of this like one group dealt with it through alcohol, the other group dealt with it through just like being very dogmatic and kind of intellectualizing, the feelings. So those were kind of my two
Hmm.
paths,
Hmm.
growing up.
But no one really dared to talk about what's going on inside of them. It was more like
Yeah,
covering up or escaping. What about your peers? Did you notice anything about your peers being stressed or anxious or having emotional issues they didn't want to share?
I think I gravitated towards friends who were very much like me, who kind of kept their deep feelings to themselves. When we talk very intellectually, or we philosophize. I don't know if that's a word, but we talk philosophy a lot. But in terms of like painful feelings, or being vulnerable, I never really associated with people who went into those emotions. I kind of kept with friends who, like I said, were similar to me in that respect.
Hmm. So, one thing that obviously happened is that you couldn't deal with the suppression anymore. And I think you mentioned it came out sideways as anger and, blaming others or judging others. But when you really look at yourself, what made you ask for help? Why did you feel at some point, you know what, this is too much?
I would like to say one, it was pain, but two, I think I started to see how these sideways outbursts and how these dysfunctional behaviors were affecting other people in my life. And like I said, I had a relationship where I really um, got a good reflection of myself in terms of how I hurt another person through my actions, someone who didn't deserve it, and that was a real wake up call to start to peel back the layers. And once I started doing that, I saw how this was affecting not just my relationships with women, but just every aspect of my life. But yeah, it was a combination of just the pain, and seeing that pain being inflicted on other people was really really the wake up call for me.
So, once you saw that someone really was deeply hurt, you thought, okay, I need to change, even though you were really experiencing a lot of pain. I mean, when you think about your pain level, that was maybe even more than what you did to other people. Were you just not so aware of it, or do you feel like it was something you were used to and so you could handle it?
I mean, I've always, it's like if you grow up, in a smoker's household, you're just used to smoking. So I just was always used to having pain, and I wouldn't even call it pain. It was just that was just my reference. You know what I mean? That was just my baseline. So and I wouldn't say deal with a great amount of pain, but I was pretty good at um, keeping things inside and just powering through. So I just sucked it up. And like I said,
Mhm.
everybody in my family did the same thing. So it was never really an expectation that I should feel any differently or expect anything different.
Do you remember when we were working on your self talk as one of the major ways to create anxiety, which a lot of people don't realize that they
Mm-hmm.
actually are fueling the anxiety by how they talk to themselves? What do you think were your most anxiety triggering thoughts, which a lot of people have? They just don't know it. So what would you say are thoughts that really
Oh,
made you realize, okay, I'm doing something to myself?
um, I would say the self judgment, the criticism was the most where I was, I would say even verbally abusive to myself in terms of the things I would say to myself. Because for me, that was just what I was used to. That was how I motivated myself. That's how my parents talked to us. That's how they talked to them. to each other. So, I wasn't even aware that if I think we talked about too, if I heard someone else using these words to talk to, each other, I would think they were, that was out of line. But I didn't think twice about, you know, um, condemning myself or judging myself or really, um, beating myself up pretty bad. And like I said, that was just what I was used to. And I didn't realize how painful it was to constantly be doing that to myself.
And what do you think was what you really believed about yourself that caused those thoughts? The core beliefs. What's the core belief that you were kind of holding on to?
At the end of the day, that that I deserved a certain amount of pain and suffering, that I had done something to deserve that, and that at the end of the day, I didn't deserve anything better, and I guess it was just like a real feeling of inadequacy and just low self worth.
And that was also self-directed anger then, right? Because a lot of people feel like I have emotions, but they're mainly angry and they're mainly at other people. And then, like with you, you realized all those thoughts were not only creating anxiety, they also created a lot of self-rejection, self-loathing, laced with anger.
I think for me, especially because I was never really an outwardly angry person, so I think all of that pain and anger I directed towards myself.
Right.
Even if someone did something to me, I would find a way to flip it and put it back on myself, that I did something or I deserved it, or somehow caused it to happen.
Now, in one of our last sessions, you heard, because I took notes on, and you also, what you were used to, saying to yourself. All these thoughts I was reading to you again. And do you remember what you felt like when you heard now, being on the other side, how you talk to yourself?
Yeah, it was it was cringeworthy, man. I wanted to stop you at some point because it just felt like it was so hearing it coming from you, and just hearing what I wrote all those months ago. It I was almost embarrassed by how disconnected I was to how much I was beating myself up at the time, and just the things I was saying to myself. Um, it was painful to listen to. It really was.
But did you still find it normal? Because at the beginning, you found it totally normal. And
No, no, no. I thought it was crazy. That's what I was like. I couldn't. I honestly, I couldn't. I blocked out how I felt at that time, because when you were reading it, it sounded like someone else. Um, yeah, I really couldn't believe how you know awful some of the things I said about myself and other people were.
And that's amazing, right? If we are looking back and not really understanding anymore how we could do this to ourselves, that means we have changed. We have changed a lot. So, what do you think were for you the keys to heal and overcome your anxiety?
I think the biggest one was learning that um, I have a choice about the words I use to talk to myself and the ideas that I have about myself. Like I can, one of the exercises we did was where I would write down, these negative thoughts I had, and then I had to write on the other side a positive, or change that into a positive narrative. And that helped me to realize that I was choosing to look at myself in this way. At the end of the day, I had a choice. I could, there's an infinite number of ways I could look at a situation or at a feeling I was having, and it was just I just wasn't I wasn't used to thinking positively or thinking productively about myself. So that was really eye opening, and I think that's what helped me the most.
That was certainly a big step to you could say, program your mind. But I think when you look back, there was also this element of having to feel it. We cannot just think our way out of anxiety. I mean, this is kind of staying on the surface. So when you were able to go back into the past or meet your inner child, what happened there for you? What did you notice? How that changed how you perceived yourself?
That I would say that was when I first started to really start to forgive myself, or really appreciate that, what happened to me was really out of my control and out of my power, and that it, as much as I wanted to deny how much, it was really painful to look at times, because I really realized how um, vulnerable we are as children, and how much things affect us when we're that young and that vulnerable. And it also gave me some compassion for myself and for my parents as well, because they didn't really know what they were doing, or they grew up in a similar way. And so, yeah, and so I was really able to forgive my parents, being able to see how I was raised, because they grew up in a similar way, and just helped me to realize they did the best they could based off of how they were raised. And so they, had a lot of the same characteristics I did, from growing up that way. And yeah, so just helped me to forgive myself, forgive my family, and kind of just bring things into perspective and make sense of what's going on today.
Do you have a sense that you had to? I mean, you said before you intellectualized a lot and, used more philosophical perspectives to deal with emotions. But now, when you look back, do you think you had to open your heart again or connect to your heart in order for you to heal the anxiety?
Yeah, I think that's the only way, because you know when I was thinking about things, or when I was philosophizing, I still had the pain, because that was just my way of escape. At the end of the day, it was my way of not feeling my heart, because there was a lot of pain blocking. I didn't want to feel my heart, because I knew that I would have to feel all that pain, um, from before, and just not just pain, but all the emotions, and it was easier to to intellectualize, or to think about things than to feel. But the real change didn't happen until I started to actually feel and go through those emotions.
And now, when you think back at, where you were and there was, all this, maybe self-rejection, what do you feel now about yourself? What's your belief about yourself? I often say that, the antidote to anxiety is trust. And for trust to be developed, we have to also see ourselves differently. Do you have a different perspective on yourself?
Yeah, I see. I don't. It's not a fight anymore to try to, like, prove that I'm this good person, or prove that I'm worthy. It's more of just like, I know that internally, you know, I'm all right. And so my actions now come from that place of being comfortable and being secure. I think secure is a good word, being secure with the fact that I'm okay the way I am, and any faults or any mistakes that I make are just that, they're just mistakes or faults, and it's not, a reason for condemnation. It's just maybe a reason for reflection, but that at the core, I'm all right, and I have something to offer and something to give.
And do you also feel like that this translated in how you take care of yourself? I always believe, besides changing how we think and how we feel and how we believe, we have to put it into action. We have to do something differently in day-to-day activities, but also in the bigger picture. And I think you have two really amazing examples where you would say, well, I changed how I took care of myself, and I also took risk now with my not going back to an old job. So what is that for you?
Well, talk about the job first. I just thought about the way what I wanted for myself. I started to uh, value my emotional state and my heart, and really made that a priority. And I had a chance to go back home and to make some money in a very high stress, um, I would say low emotionally intelligent workspace. And it would, I just once I got a taste of how it felt to be in tune with myself, it just didn't seem worth it anymore. And it motivated me to try and really, take care of myself on that level, and find another way to provide, which I'm confident that I can do. And yeah, and like, the better you feel about yourself, just the more you take seriously the decisions you make and how they affect you, and you see how you feel about yourself also affects other people, so that factored into it as well. I don't want to continue to hurt others because I'm in pain. So that was really a priority for me.
And do you feel like you treat yourself more like the adult you want to be, and maybe the adult that you wanted to have when you were a child? It's the outgrowing of anxiety to not live in that insecurity, not live in the self denial, but really treat yourself in the best possible way.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm finally just becoming my own friend. Like, I can encourage myself. I can talk to myself in like how I would want, like you said, how I would want a parent or a friend to talk to me, which is not in a, not cracking the whip, not judging, not condemning, but just kind of, encouraging. Like, yeah, we can do this. We got this. And it's really powerful to have that coming from myself, so I don't need to um, search and beg for that from other people, because I've got it internally.
What do you think would have happened if you would have not worked on yourself?
Wow, wow. I think that I would have, I would have continued. I would have continued on a downward spiral. I think the pain would have gotten worse, and I mean, like I said, a lot of my family members end up going to alcohol or um, overworking or things like that. I think it wouldn't have been good. It wouldn't have been good. I think I was lucky that I experienced that pain because it woke me up. Um, yeah. Um, yeah, I think there was only one path for me, and it wasn't a good one. It was just going to be more pain and more suffering.
So it's kind of interesting that the anxiety in some ways was really a catalyst for you to find a greater groundedness and also a greater happiness with yourself.
Yeah, the pain was. I mean, I'm a stubborn guy. I gotta. It takes a lot for me to wake up sometimes. So sometimes I think the pain was the only way, and at the time, it was really tough. It was really tough. But looking back, I'm grateful for everything that happened.
That's really great. What would you leave the viewers with as a final word of advice? Something that you would say, okay, this is definitely something I would especially recommend men that are dealing with anxiety or insecurity or fear.
That it is not just about you. You know that when you're in pain, or when you're hurting, or when you're not living to your potential, you are um, affecting those around you. And I think that's what changed for me, because I think as men, we feel we can stomach pain, we can push through pain, we can tolerate misery, and we don't realize that when we come home miserable, it affects our wife and kids. or if we're resentful, it's affecting our relationships with our friends, and it's just holding us down. It's just like a weight we're carrying around for no reason. And then once we start to really go into that and get free, you know, we see how everyone around us, everything around us changes because it was us. You know, we're carrying all this weight and we're just dragging everybody down with us. And once we allow ourselves to really feel good, I think that's it too. I think a lot of men, we feel guilty or ashamed to ask for help or to even want to feel better. And it's like, you know, you don't get any medals for being in pain. I mean, you're not gonna get a trophy for suffering. Like uh, it's painful and it's a lot of work. But I think, you know, the world needs men to really get healthy and be able to show up for the people around them.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I think that's really the truth. And it's so nice for you to share that it is something that can really transform your life if you are listening to the pain and committing to healing it and finding out where it comes from and taking the tools and ultimately open your heart to yourself. Everything is different. And I'm sure that everyone's life that you're touching from now on also will be positively affected by the changes that you have made.
Yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to the next chapter.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Friedemann here. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about fear and anxiety, here you'll find guided meditations, webinars, and interviews with some of the most renowned experts in the field of empowerment. Delve into the over 230 videos and more to come every week.